Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene. And today we're talking about animal RPGs, I think he says.
He says that'd be me. Anamorphic / animal RPGs.
Basically, you play animals.
In some games, yes. In other games, you play animals that have mutated or morphed into have human-like characteristics, like hands, thumbs, opposable thumbs.
Okay.
They walk on 2 feet, upright, that stuff.
All I can think of is Gamma World, where they've been mutated. So
Yes, that's an early example of that kind of situation. But I can even mention an earlier one that I actually played in back in 1976 from Fantasy Games Unlimited. There's a game called Bunnies and Burrows.
Okay.
So in this game, you play more or less intelligent rabbits, but you play rabbits. No anamorphicness, evolvedness, or anything like that. You just play run-of-the-mill rabbits who were slightly more intelligent because you can communicate with each other and talk to each other. And you have adventures dealing with rabbit-type stuff and problems. In Bunnies and Burrows, the only true monster is man.
Okay.
Of which the bunnies have no concept of why they exist. But they're monsters.
I can see that.
So my brother, at one point, he brings home this game. He said he bought it here in Campbell, either at the game table or at, what was the other place that was here? Oh my God, D&J Hobbies, which neither one of those exists anymore, by the way. But there were these 2 hobby stores here in Campbell, this little town next to where we live, and he brought it home, and I'm like, whoa, we play bunnies? And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, so we gave it a shot. You know, we made rolled up characters, regular D&D style, just roll up characters, but it wasn't. It was based on the percentile system, so there was no D20 to roll. Well, there was a percentile system, so there was a D10,
2 D10s,
2 D10s, right? So I think it's pretty interesting that this game was made, and it was like 1976. So it broke ground in a couple ways, right? If you look it up, the 3 main things it did was it lets you play something other than human, which was a first for an RPG, and in this case, a rabbit, which it is what it is, as they say these days. But I thought it was interesting. The other thing is that it had skills, rudimentary skill system, and I forgot what the third one was. What was the third one, honey? I mentioned it earlier.
I don't know, babe.
Yes, right. I remember now. It had its own martial arts section, rules.
So the bunnies that you played were martial artists? You
could be. You could have that was a certain fighter, because they had different classes, and they could do martial arts. Much later on. This was 1976, I think in the early 90s, mid 90s. GURPS, of course, teamed up with the author of the game, and they came out with a GURPS version of Bunnies and Burrows. And instead of calling it martial arts, of course, Steve Jackson, with the penchant for have nice handy titles, he called it Bunny Foo. And I think a lot of people thought that was very cute, and the name stuck, Bunny Foo.
Okay.
I remember playing. I thought, it was really interesting because it wasn't a D&D game, right? It wasn't a game where you played bunnies and you had 4 or 5 hit points at the most, right? A fox have about 25. A dog, depending on the type of dog, it would have 40. So combat and fighting everything is not how you did things, right? We did a lot of negotiating with animals. We did a lot of bribery with animals, like animals that would like to probably eat us or do something like that. We bargained that we would give it food if it would just leave us alone. I think it was, I forget what animal it was. That it was obviously an animal that ate
bunnies.
No. Well, yeah, it could eat bunnies, but it was probably an omnivore, because we fed it cabbage and lettuce and stuff that we stole from the farmer's garden. They make the farmer very happy, but we were negotiating and stuff like that, and we were doing a lot of stuff, like we avoided traps, because the farmer put a lot of traps for us to kill us, because we keep stealing his food, I don't know why they're so delicate about food. They have plenty of food, those humans. Anyway, so it was pretty interesting. It had also an interesting mechanic where you would advance levels in skills depending on what you use. Like if you use the strength, then your ability in strength would go up. Some people said that this was a problematic, some number cruncher type person, because because it was all totally random, your skills. So if you already had a high skill, then the chance of you increasing your skill was also higher. So like, let's say you had a 15 strength. So you double that, you would have a 30% chance of it going up. And then if it went up, it would go up to 16. And then you'd have a 32% chance of it going up when you use that skill, the strength. So, and then I was pretty lucky. My bunny was really strong, so I made him a fighter. And I just kept rolling. I was really lucky. And his strength skill and all his fighting skills would go up because everything was based on this strength. And I thought I was pretty badass bunny.
Okay.
You have this weird look in your eye, like you don't know where to go from there. So
I have no idea where you're going from there.
So this was, I was a little kid. I thought it was a cute game, and I think a lot of people back in 1976 and the early 80s, because it did get a second edition around 1982, I think, and it basically didn't do much changes to the rules. I don't think there was any major changes to rules. The only thing I know for sure is that they changed the cover. The cover got a different look, but I don't think there was a lot of updating to the rules and stuff like that.
So are there other games that?
Well, I was just gonna say that what was interesting about that game, and I guess it's more what is it? It's really apparent or really shows up in miniature games. There was this interesting combat table, right, where you would do a move, like let's say you wanted to do a bite and hold. So that was a move that you could do, which is obviously you're gonna bite and hold on to where you bite, and the counter, or if the opponent did, let's say, a rake, then on a chart it would affect what percentage chance that move against the other defensive move or the counterattack would be good. And there was other things like a rake, where a kick and a rake, where I guess you would kick and with your back paws and rake the opponent. There was this chart, and I hate to tell you, there was this chart where it would give you percentages. It would up and down your percentage, give you bonuses and penalties depending on what you did and versus what the opponent did. And I thought that was really interesting. I guess it's a holdover from the military game, but at the time, I had not seen that, since the only other previous RPG I had ever played was Dungeons and Dragons, original Dungeons and Dragons. So we had a lot of fun. I think it was really interesting. The highlight of my bunny's career was there was this particularly pesky rat. I don't know what kind of dog it was. It was a big dog. According to us, it could have been I guess it couldn't have been a Chihuahua, but there was this dog that was really like a really pain in the ass to us. And at one point, we set up all these traps for it and stuff, and we were gonna take down that dog. And he almost killed me, but we killed that dog. Especially me, I was getting really lucky, and I was like I said, I was a really strong bunny. So it was a really fun game. I don't even remember why we stopped. I think I just don't remember why we stopped, but I remember we played it not a lot, but we played enough that we got advanced enough levels to kill a dog.
Okay.
So the next time I even ran across anything like this was probably Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I had started reading the comic book. Now, this must have been the late 80s, mid to late 80s, when me and my friends got into comic books. Now, it was really late in the comic book world scene, but we got into the comic books, and we were collecting and going to comic book stores, and it was fun. And one of the comic books that I gravitated toward was Eastman and Laird's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I just thought it was interesting to have these anamorphic turtles that like pizza and were teenagers, going around and kicking butt, but secretly, right? Because they weren't out in the open. They would, they would come out of the sewer, and they would. I think Raphael was the only one that really liked going out in public of New York with his trench coat and hat and his fedora, and people were always shocked to see them, like, whoa, what's that? And that was interesting. And when Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles came out the game, I was like, Yeah, that's pretty cool. Now, I bought that game years after it had come out, and it's based on Palladium by Kevin Sambadia. I don't remember if that's correctly his last name. He seems to have a love-hate, not he, but RPGers have a love-hate syndrome with that guy and his rules. People hate it, and some people love it. It's the same system that powers Rifts. It's the same system that powers.
His name was Kevin Eastman.
That was the artist
Oh.
of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Eastman and Laird. I don't know what Laird's first name
Peter.
was. Peter Laird. Yeah, I think at one point they had a falling out and they stopped making the comics together. But anyway, years later they made the Teenage Mutant Ninja movie. I remember taking my nephews to go see it, and they were so excited. They were about 11 or 12, and we were waiting in line. And I remember my little nephew Fred. He's practically dancing, waiting in line, excited. This is back when you used to wait in line for movies, and it was really neat. It was a really neat movie. I thought it was really amazing how they could move with those costumes on, and I thought it was a pretty cool movie. I liked it.
The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are one of my favorites.
Yes, and another interesting thing about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles the movie, it was one of the first movies by New Line Cinema, which later on dumped all their money into Lord of the Rings movie, which I'm not going to Lord of the Rings right now, but yes. So I bought the book. I made characters, and I thought it was pretty cool. I thought it was very interesting. I never played, but I made a ton of different characters because you started with a basic animal like a raccoon or otter or whatever, and then you would add them. Then you would kind of mutate them. You would have a reason for the mutation and stuff like that. And it was interesting.
Okay.
Another reason I kind of brought this up to Jolene, I was like, well, why do we like these games? Now, I'm not a psychologist, and I think a lot of people will look at these games and go, oh, they're geared for children, right?
No, I don't think so.
So Bunnies and Burrows, I probably wasn't geared toward children. The guy based it on Watership Down, which I've never seen the movie, but I heard enough that it's kind of a downer movie. So Jolene will never let me watch it.
It's a novel.
No, they made a movie out of it too.
I believe you, but
yes, you're right. It was a novel.
You shouldn't say it was a movie when it was actually a book.
Correct. At the time, back then, it was probably just a novel. They did make an animated version of the book. I never saw it. I never read Watership Down. Have you read it?
I don't know.
Probably not. Anyway, so I'm thinking, why was I so intrigued with this thing? And I think it's just, you find animals cute and cuddly and neat, and here you're playing the exact opposite. Well, some animals, and then they have these like special powers, or like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Turtles are slow. They're cute, but they're slow,
but not if they're mutated.
But you mutate them, and now they're like ninjas, right? So it's really interesting. I thought it was interesting. Going along the lines of strange anamorphic or animal RPGs, there was one called Usagi Yojimbo, which is weird because it's based on a comic book, I believe, of where this samurai bunny goes around on adventures and solves problems, right?
Another bunny.
Yes, another bunny. And I saw it at certain game stores where they had a lot of inventory back in the old days. A lot of game stores would just have books, right? D&J Hobby was like a depository for old games, and they just would never get rid of their games, right? They would just have this long, huge shelf of RPGs, and I would go through them, every once in a while. And I remember seeing Usagi Yojimbo not comic book, but game. But I never picked it up. I never bought it. I never looked into the rules. But it's just another example of this type of anamorphic RPG. Another one I did see and really wanted to play and almost bought a few times was Albedo or something like that. It's also based on a cartoon or a comic strip, if you want to look at it that way. And what's weird is this is a science fiction game. where you play animals, uplifted animals. Now, I'm not sure what the background is, but what was really intriguing to me was that the bunnies were the evil ones in this game. So there was I forget, the rabbit consortium or something like that. And it starts off with the rabbits basically attacking what is like a peaceful world. And they're just like shooting things up, and they go after the civilian police force, and the civilian police force does a valiant effort to fight back. Now this is the comic book, but they're just overrun by the superior numbers and superior firepower of the bunnies, and it's brutal, right? Because they talk about how they show up the writer. I forget who the writer was, but there is a panel where obviously these like bear and fox characters or people are surrounded, and they surrendered, and then in the bubble where he writes, he goes, even those that surrendered, many did not live.
The author was called Steve Galachi.
Galachi, yes, that's right. And I never did get into that one. I never did buy it, which I'm surprised I never did. But it was really interesting because, like I said, it was also an RPG that came from a comic book or a comic strip, and I find that this seems to be quite of a trend, right? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic book, Usagi Yojimbo comic book, Albedo was a comic strip, I think, and I think it's pretty interesting stuff.
I'm not sure why you find it odd that a game would come from comic books, because people like the comic books, so they want to play in the universe, right? Or create the universe to play in.
Right. I think you're right. I think that's not surprising. It seems kind of like, to me, it seems like in this instance, Anamorphic games really do
go with the IP.
Yeah.
So why do you think? Well, I never really thought about Anamorphic games until Saul asked me the question about it, and I'm like going, okay.
You're like, what? What are you talking about? What do you mean Anamorphic? What does that mean? Yeah, you play animals that are.
I would think that, to me, that would be a kind of game that you would, although reading about all these games, they're for adults, right?
Yes.
But to me, animals, like when I run a D&D game for little kids,
yes, I
would make the little animal heroes, right? Because they're little animals and kids like animals, right?
Yeah, I think even Bunnies and Burrows, when it first came out, it wasn't taken seriously. People go, is this a joke? Like adults, right? And they were like, because I remember reading articles in was it Dragon Magazine? I'm even not sure Dragon Magazine existed, but I remember reading these places as they were like, is this some sort of a joke RPG? Is it for children? And it definitely wasn't for children, because you just can tell that it wasn't geared for children. It was an actual role playing game, nothing simple, nothing dumbed down. It was a game created in 1976. D&D was made in 1974, so it's really early, and it shows, right? People who have reviewed it years later, they're saying, well, it's kind of strange because they didn't have modern, what is it called, publishing software in 1976. This stuff was like written on a typewriter, and you could see the strikes of the, like, space opera is very similar. And
that's how everything was done then, dude.
Yeah, but it wasn't like, D&D. If you look at D&D, the little original 3 booklets, it was done on a typewriter and photocopied or whatever they did back then.
Or it's called Xeroxed.
I think it's just very interesting that these games came out the way they did, and it's interesting that also that I don't think an Anamorphic game has really taken off like gangbusters. It's always been kind of like a niche part of RPGs. And I always thought it was interesting. I thought it was kind of cool to play an animal that had been either uplifted, that's a term, or mutated into to have opposable thumbs and walking on 2 feet.
Okay.
So I think another game that I've come across in my long period of playing, but I've never actually seen, was this game called Justifiers. Now, Justifiers is an RPG
By Star Child Publications.
Star Child. I've never seen this game. I've never seen this game in print, and I've only first heard about it.
Oh, but these poor people are anamorphic animals created by human corporations.
Yes.
It's like a
and
dark conspiracy, kind of, maybe.
Well, it's actually kind of more sinister.
Well, then that's definitely not a kid's game, obviously.
No,
right?
and I think because a lot of this stuff is really, adult oriented. So in Justifiers, they are made by corporations, so you don't have to send humans to explore space or explore worlds. So they're kind of like slaves. And then there's a slave revolt, and that's the world that you play in. So it's interesting. I think
it's a dark world.
It's a dark future, right? Yes, exactly.
That's very interesting. We got it. We went down a rabbit hole, literally,
figuratively,
literally, when we were talking about this, and I was like, well, I can understand. It's a game, right? Bunnies and Burrows. Someone brings it out and goes, okay, you're going to play this bunny, and I'm fine with that. I would just think of my bunny as me, right? As I do all my characters. But then I was reading all of these different ones that people have, like this one that you were talking about, Justifiers. It's kind of dark for animals.
Yeah, you're right. I think you are totally right. And that's an early game too. Like what, the mid '80s that one came out?
Yeah, it was published in
I never even heard of
1988.
Oh wow.
And yeah, I don't know. When you look at space opera, let's just look at space opera.
Yes.
You get to play cat people, right?
Yes.
And there's other races.
Dog people, Ursoid, ape people, lizardmen.
Which kind of makes sense, right? Because people like their animals, their cats, their dogs and stuff, and they talk to them like they're people. And so you think of cats and dogs as having their own little lives. There's all kinds of movies about them, right? Where the cat goes
and they have their own personalities.
Yes.
And all this. You are totally correct.
I don't have a hard time going from there's a race of cat people when you look at cats and they're like disdainfully looking at you because you didn't bother to feed them right soon enough or whatever.
I think what's weird about movies is that they're usually geared toward little kids.
Those are some of our favorite movies, though.
Like Cats versus Dogs,
yes,
right? Yes.
Yeah.
And even the ones where The Secret Life of Pets.
Yes, that was great. That's a cartoon, right?
That's an animated movie,
animated.
Yeah. And you're right. And in that one, they're not anamorphic. They're just animals,
right.
But they have their own
personalities, their own lives, right?
As soon as the human's gone,
as the human goes,
they're like, "Hey, party time!" and all this other stuff. And so obviously they get into trouble because that's the point of the movie.
So obviously, if they're making movies about it, and there's books. When he's talked about this, I was thinking about Winnie the Pooh.
Oh yeah,
because Winnie the Pooh has his own life, and Christopher with Christopher Robinson, it's not Christopher Robinson, is it?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, when he's with him, he is just a Pooh Bear, right? He's a.
Does he ever talk to Christopher Robinson? I think it is.
Christopher Robinson talks to him. I don't think Pooh Bear talks back.
But Pooh Bear has his own with Piglet and all.
Yeah, he has his own little world. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Tigger.
Oh, how could I forget Tigger? Yeah, I don't remember reading too much. I mean, is there more than one story about Pooh Bear?
Yes.
Does he have multiple books? I don't know. I don't remember. And now, it's been a long time since I was a little kid, and I don't think we bought a lot of Pooh books for our son Augustine. I think one, the one maybe two, and those are the main stories, right? That they made into the animated show.
Yeah.
Yeah, we kind of.
But if you think about that, then we went down a rabbit hole thinking about these different kinds of things. Well, Christopher Robinson, he talks to Pooh Bear like he's a real person,
right?
Because he tells him all of his problems,
right? Which
is what everybody does when they're a kid. If you're a girl, maybe, I don't know about boys. Christopher Robinson always did it.
Yeah. So.
But you talk to your stuffed animals, and you imagine them talking back. They don't actually talk back because then people would think you were crazy. But it's a thing, right? It's where
a lot of kids play pretend that way, right? And I think that's what role playing is.
So it makes perfect sense to me that people would want to play anamorphized. I don't know if that's a word.
It is now.
Anamorphic animals.
Right. And Yeah, I really, yeah, I was wrestling with this idea. Are we just trying to be childlike when we like those kind of games? And I don't know why I'm attracted to play or bought quite a few of these anamorphic games. And there's more, right? And they keep making more. They keep making more newer and newer games exactly like this. So not too long ago, Year Zero came out with Alpha Lab or Alpha Gene Lab or something like that, which you play animals that have been mutated and are what is it?
Sentient now?
Sentient, and they're anamorphized, and you're a mutant living in the post-apocalyptic world animal. And I actually don't have those rules. Actually, I have Mutant Year Zero, but not Gene Alpha, whatever it's called. And they even made a computer game, a real-time strategy game, not a role-playing game, computer game based on Gene Lab or Alpha Lab. So, and that game is about 4 or 5 years old, maybe, and just recently kickstarted last year, 2019, maybe late 2019, 2020.
He's looking at me like I should know this.
No, I'm I'm squinching my brain, my side of my face, trying to think. But because I'm almost kickstarted it, right? It's called Historia. It is a Italian production, or it's an Italian company.
Historia Rodentia, right? Is that the one?
That's the one. And it's what do they call it? Not a dark one. I think it is dark. A dark fantasy?
Brush Fire Skirmish game, it says. From the Napoleonic satire. It's a historical parody and satire of the Napoleonic Wars that uses animals in the place of history's greatest armies. Now,
Whoa.
are we talking about the same game?
I didn't know that about it, but that's interesting. I know that it's a dark fantasy, minimal magic.
It's called
system.
Bushfire. So maybe it's a different game. It says Historia Rodentia, but then when you click on it, it says Bushfire.
I don't know. But it's a fantasy role-playing game based on 5th edition, which is hugely popular. We've talked about that. So I think that's the only reason I didn't kickstart it, right? I was like, do I really want another game based on 5th edition rules? I wasn't sure. And then I wasn't sure if the playing anamorphic characters would be a sell for my players.
Well, when you play Bulldog, Sippy always likes to play that cranky bear character. When you play space games or space opera games, any kind of space opera games,
right.
There's a lot of aliens that are animals, right?
Well, even Traveler had the Raouf or something like that, which were I think that was the name of. I don't even know what they're called. No, I don't. Maybe that's the star system they come from, which is kind of silly because Raouf is like a Raouf, right? And they were dogs, right? They were basically sentient dogs, and I think they were not seen in good light either, which is kind of weird.
Here's my question. So if all these sentient animals in space, what if they came to Earth and saw our poor little doggies and kitties living in, I guess they would call it slavery to us because,
Well, I think most people would disagree with you as far as cats, right? Because I just said something about, there was another
another space game.
No, there's another fantasy game called Pugmire, which is about actually it's a post-apocalyptic. So the man is some forgotten thing relegated to myth and history, right?
And the dogs rule the world.
And the dogs are in charge. Well, no, they don't not in charge, but the dogs pay homage to the man, and they keep loyal to his tenants, right? Whatever those tenants are. But the cats, there's a cat continent, and they feel that the humans who used to serve them left them without giving them all the keys of knowledge, right? So it takes a different take on how dogs view humans. They're loyal to humans and keep the tenets of humanity alive by trying to adhere to their tenets. And the cats are like, no, they just left us. They used to feed us and stuff, and
now we have to feed ourselves.
And they didn't give us all the information that we needed. They left us. They didn't give us all the keys, figuratively or
literally.
of knowledge and stuff. So that's Pugmire, and then I think I forget what the name of the addition. And I heard that the system Pugmire is actually really cool. Now Pugmire's been around for quite a few years, and I even thought about buying it, but at the time my son Augustine was like becoming a teenager, so I don't know, it was at least 5-6 years ago, and I didn't think playing a dog, he would think it's probably be too cute, that he was beyond that, and kind of I might have mentioned it to him, and he's like, you give me that, I don't feel like playing that.
Tween look of
yeah, it's a tween look of this thing with my little kid. And I didn't buy it, never bought it, but I've heard that the system is really well done. I heard that the adventures, and that I think that game is kind of geared toward children or very young players, RPG players.
That's only in your brain.
In my brain,
yes, it could or could not be.
So, and then like I said, I thought about Kickstarter Historia, but it was based on the 5th edition. I go, do I need another 5th edition game?
Of course you do.
I have already. What is it? I haven't received yet, but I kickstarted like a cyberpunk.
I don't like this Kickstarter thing.
And I kickstarted maybe a couple cyberpunk ones. One is called Low Life.
Good Lord!
And another one is called, I forget what it's called. But I was able to restrain myself, Jolene, and I did not back Historia, which I really should have, because
because you need to not back everything.
Because I don't back everything. Because it was like not struggling, but it didn't fund like a huge amount of money, like a blockbuster. They obviously funded over what they needed. Their goal was, but what I also liked about it was the art. That these guys, I don't know if you saw the art for Historia, but it is amazing. They have these different species of dogs. I guess, what do you call them? Species, like a Chihuahua versus a bulldog. What are they? They're not species. What are they? They're not races. What are they called?
I don't
know. Jolene's on limited sleep, so her brain might not be working very well. What do they call them? Oh my God, I'm drawing a blank. So anyway, you know what I mean. So they have like this dog who looks kind of like a Jack Russell Terrier, the head, right? But he's like super, like ripped, like a bodybuilder. And he's holding the sword, and then they have this other one that looks kind of like a Doberman, and he's also holding an axe and stuff like that. So they have different personalities based on what kind of dog they are. And of course, they throw in other species of animals, owls, jackals, foxes, eagles, and stuff like that into the rules. And in fact, I think I hate to say this, but since I mentioned Drive-Thru RPG quite a bit in our last session, in our last episode, they just published their PDF of the game and are selling it Drive-Thru RPG. So that is brand new, hot off the press. I think it just came available on March 25th.
So if you are interested in these games, playing animals, or playing anamorphized animals, anamorphic animals.
Yeah, there's a lot of games out there that you can find and you can play. All these games are probably available in one form or another. You could definitely find the PDFs of these games on the internet in different sites. On the secondary market, you could probably find quite a few of these older RPGs on eBay. Though, like anything else on eBay, sometimes they want some crazy amounts of money for them. Others, not so much. I think you could probably find Justifiers for what it would cost today to make that book, or even cheaper. But other games like Albedo or whatever, that one, it's probably a little bit more pricier for some reason. I don't know why.
Okay, there you go. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
You have a good day.